Okay, perfect. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the OII Europe's Intersex 101 session. My name is Erin Kuzemka.
I'm Ins Kominga.
Perfect. So, should we start? And yeah, the question that we want to start with is, who are intersex people? Like, who are we? Who am I? And intersex people are people born with sex characteristics, which include sexual anatomy, reproductive organs, hormonal structure, and/or levels, and/or chromosomal patterns that do not fit the binary system of male and female bodies.
Yeah, and about the term is an umbrella term that stands for the spectrum of variations of sex characteristics that can naturally occur within the human species. And the term intersex acknowledges the fact that physically sex is a spectrum.
Exactly. And talking about when people might discover that they're intersex, sex characteristics are set out from birth. So it's something that you're born with, no matter whether you're intersex or not. However, the fact that someone has an intersex body can become apparent at different times in their life. At birth, during childhood, in puberty, or even in adulthood. Depending on specific life circumstances and the degree of taboo in their environment, a person might learn that they have an intersex variation at a very early age or later in life. Some intersex people never find out at all.
Yep. So according to the United Nations, at least 1.7% of the population are born with intersex traits. This means almost one person in 60 has a variation or is born with a variation of sex characteristics and does not fit the typical medical and social definition of male and female. And thus, that at all ages are at risk of being subjected to discrimination and other human rights violations on the basis of their variation of sex characteristics.
Exactly. And now talking about why the intersex movement, what the intersex movement is working towards, like which are the intersex human rights violations that intersex people are subjected to. The thing is, according to studies published in the Netherlands in 2014, at least 1 in 200 people are at risk of being subjected to non-vital invasive surgeries and other medical interventions like hormonal treatment based on being diagnosed by medical professionals as having a disorder of sex development or DSD, or an unspecified diagnosis such as unspecified malformation of the male/female genitalia. Many of these interventions, especially but not limited to surgeries, are irreversible, deferrable, non-vital interventions on healthy bodies. And these interventions most often take place in infancy and childhood without personal and fully informed consent.
Yeah, so we also say, we call it intersex genital mutilation, or short IGM, which is an intervention on healthy intersex bodies. It is performed when, according to the social and medical notions, a person's external genitals do not look normal enough to pass as male or female genitals. Performing IGM was not always the default practice. Before the middle of the 20th century, as a 2016 article of 3 general surgeons of the United States pointed out, and this is a quote, most children born with genitalia that did not fit the male-female binary norm were not subjected to surgery. So beginning with the 1950s, however, in an era where pressure to conform to social norms was unyielding, the standard treatment protocol changed. Infants born with atypical genitalia were increasingly subjected to surgical procedures such as clitoral reduction, vaginoplasty, gonadectomy, and hypospadias repairs, primarily to normalize the gendered appearance, not to improve function. And surgeries and medical interventions on intersex infants and children are still common. According to a 2015 survey published by the EU Fundamental Rights Agency, so-called sex normalizing surgeries on intersex infants and children are carried out in at least 21 of the EU member states.
Exactly. And talking about consequences of those non-vital interventions, I mean, like anybody, intersex people can face health issues. However, in addition, many intersex people face health issues that they acquire as a result of human rights violations. After birth, as children, adolescents, and adults, intersex people face violations of their physical integrity, including medical interventions without personal, prior, persistent, and fully informed consent. This can cause psychological trauma. Resulting physical impairments include, but are not limited to, painful scar tissue and lack of general and/or erotic sensation, osteoporosis and osteopenia already at a very young age after the removal of gonadal tissue, urinary impairments as a result of interventions on the urethral tract, including from so-called hypospadias repair and other genital surgeries and infections. Intersex children face the risk of a disturbed family life due to medicalization, which can include extended and/or multiple hospitalizations, multiple surgeries and/or procedures, invasive testing, administration of medication, including hormone therapies, and clinical research practices. They are also at risk of not being able to develop their full potential and of dropping out of school due to effects of medicalization and related trauma, such as post-traumatic stress disorder, chronic illness, or disability.
Because being intersex in itself is still seen as a disorder and covered under rare diseases, when pre-implantation diagnosis or prenatal screening show a risk of variations of sex characteristics in embryos and fetuses, both may be prevented from further developing. In the UK, for example, embryos determined to have an intersex variation are on the termination list for implantation, and several parents from different countries in the Council of Europe region have reported to OII Europe that they were under huge pressure from doctors to abort their intersex child. In other cases, prenatal treatment with high risk of off-label use medication, dexamethasone, is prescribed. So dexamethasone has proven to be at a high risk of long-term negative effects on the child's physical health and cognitive capacity, and also impacts the health of the parent carrying the child. However, to date, only Sweden has discontinued the use of the drug for fetal treatment.
Yes, and talking about intersex genital mutilation and IGM, we also wanted to touch on commonalities with also FGM, or female genital mutilation. I just want to give a quick trigger warning. We're gonna talk a little bit more about surgeries. So, intersex genital mutilation and female genital mutilation share many common characteristics, but have vastly different explicit legal standards that are in place. There are explanations of some of the commonalities. While many legal contexts do not explicitly address intersex genital mutilation, female genital mutilation is widely addressed in the European legal landscape. This legal differentiation, though, is largely arbitrary and based in the same cultural assumptions and stereotypes that threaten the rights of intersex people to begin with. So, both practices are framed in terms of need to be accepted socially. However, for many intersex people, surgeries in their childhood and teenage years do not improve their situation concerning social inclusion or marginalization. Both practices are motivated by beliefs about what is considered appropriate, acceptable sexual behavior. In case of intersex people, the ultimate goal of those performing IGM is to allow for penetrative intercourse of the future adult and for an alleged ability to procreate. Neither the impossibility to foresee the future intersex adult's gender identity, sexual orientation, or sexual preference, nor the fact that the capacity for penetrative intercourse may be less important for the less intersex adult than unharmed genitalia are taken into account. Both practices are motivated by the notion that parts that are not considered female or male enough should be removed. In case of intersex people, this includes interventions on infants and children, such as clitoral reduction or recession, removing the labia, moving the opening of the urethra to the tip of the penis, to name but a few. Both practices are impactful on the person's lives and health. In case of intersex people, this includes impairment of sexual sensation, poorer sexual functions, painful scarring, painful intercourse, increased sexual anxieties, problems with desire, infertility issues, and lifelong trauma, including feelings of child abuse and sexual abuse. So yeah, we talked about these horrible human rights violations that are still happening, but we also want to touch on what we actually want to happen. So how we want our human rights to be respected, and what are the existing good practices that already exist.
Yeah, let me give some examples. From the last year, we created good practice map again. And here are a few of these that I would like to highlight. So in November 2020, the European Commission published the first ever EU LGBTIQ equality strategy. The French government launched an action plan on LGBTI phobia under the responsibility of the Interministerial Delegation Against Racism, Anti-Semitism, and Anti-LGBT plus hatred. In February 2020, Belgium amended its anti-discrimination law to include sex characteristics among the protection grounds. It also joined the few countries that have legislation in place on hate crime, which is Malta and Greece, and hate speech, also in Greece. The Irish National LGBTI plus inclusion strategy addresses intersex-related issues. In May 2020, the European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights published the results of its EU LGBTI survey, the second one. Almost 140,000 LGBTI people from 28 countries participated, making the study the largest survey of its kind to this date. And for the first time, specific questions about intersex people experiences were included. So the findings accessible through the LGBTI Survey Data Explorer showed that intersex people in Europe are among the most vulnerable of the LGBTIQ plus spectrum. In 2020, also in France, the Interministerial Delegation Against Racism, Anti-Semitism, and Anti-LGBT plus hatred funded the campaign Intersex Justice Now, created by the national intersex-led organization Collectif Intersex et Alliés, also known as OII France. The city of Bern in Switzerland adopted the Action Plan 2019 to 2022, measures for the equality of LGBTIQ, and works closely and continuously with the Swiss intersex-led organization to plan regular events and make intersex persons visible in society. And yeah, this is just the excerpt. There's more on our website. You can download this good practice map also from previous years.
Yes, so all of them are available on oieurope.org.
Yeah.
So yeah, these are all very important things, but talking about the most important is obviously banning the non-vital surgeries, because intersex people, like all people, deserve to make their own decisions about their own bodies. And we wanted to look on existing legislations that already do that. So in 2015, Malta accepted the Gender Identity, Gender Expression, and Sex Characteristics Act, which is really, 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 really good. And in the years following that, similar laws were installed in Portugal, Iceland, and recently in Germany with the protection for children born with variants of sex development.
Yeah, and I would just like to add that you know, there are still some critique points on these legislations, but yeah, these are the first ones that exist, so that's a positive thing.
Yeah, hopefully it's only the beginning.
Yeah. So in existing statements, so in 2017, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe confirmed in its resolution promoting the human rights of and eliminating discrimination against intersex people that it considers these kind of surgeries to be serious breaches of physical integrity, and highlighted that they are performed despite the fact that there's no evidence to support the long-term successes of such treatments, no immediate danger to health, and no genuine therapeutic purpose for the treatment. In 2019, the European Parliament emphasized in its resolution the rights of intersex people, that it strongly condemns sex normalizing treatments and surgery, and that it encourages member states to adopt similar legislation as soon as possible. Since 2009, many UN committees issued recommendations on the topic of intersex rights: the CRC, CAT, CESCR, the CEDAW, CCPR, CRPD, and UPR. And in 2015, the Council of Europe Commissioner for Human Rights released the issue paper, Human Rights and Intersex. Also in 2015, the Fundamental Rights Agency created a focus paper on the situation of intersex people. 2017, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe had a resolution called Protecting the Human Rights of and Eliminating Discrimination Against Intersex People. And 2019 as well, the European Parliament released its resolution on the rights of intersex people.
Yeah, so there are a lot of incredible, amazing resolutions already existing. But talking about how it all started, you know, for so many years, intersex movement intersex people were invisible, you know, and intersex movement is actually quite young. And, you know, in the early 90s, especially with the creation of internet, some intersex individuals who have been like treated as children and infants back in the day found the strength to speak up and were able to connect with each other through the internet, you know. And in the early 2000s, the intersex movement really started to grow, and, you know, internet was allowing more and more options for people to connect and find each other, you know, after so many years of living in isolation and shame and stigma. People were able to finally connect with others like them and join and to fight together to fight for their human rights. So as you can see on this image here, the first ever group started in 1985, and even more were created in the 90s, and yeah, even more in the recent years. And yes, I would say that intersex movement is very well connected and growing very fast. And yeah, it's really cool how much we're growing after all these years of being in the shadows. Now there is a whole, like a real emergence and growth of the movement.
Yeah, some of our resources that you can find on our website for download are, for example, Standing Up for the Human Rights of Intersex People, How Can You Help? That's our Allies Toolkit. The aim of this toolkit is to answer all the questions that come to your mind on what it is like to be an intersex person in Europe today, and how you can become a great ally, an intersex ally. Then the Parents Toolkit, Supporting Your Intersex Child, which is also co-created with IGLIO and IPA. This guide has been introducing the topic of intersex children and their parents, to how to best support their intersex child and where to get further information.
Oh yeah, that part is, yeah.
So I'm just skipping some of the things, and then the last toolkit that we had is the legal toolkit, the so-called legal toolkit protecting intersex people in Europe, a toolkit for law and policymakers that comes with an accompanying appendix and checklist, also for download. And all of these toolkits we try to make available in many European languages. Currently, the legal toolkit is available in 3 languages, and the parents and the allies toolkit are in several European languages. Yeah, I'll just for this part.
Yeah, all of them in many different languages can be found on our website, oieurope.org. And so if we're thinking about some key things that we want you to take from this session, is that intersex people exist, that we're out here and our human rights need to be respected and recognized and fully implemented. And yeah, that there is already a lot of content on intersex online. So you can go to our website and find the educational materials. And if we would say a couple of tips to LGBTI plus activists, is that please don't apply for extensive funding just to start working on intersex, especially if you have no intersex leadership in your organization. Please bear in mind that needs of intersex people differ from LGB and T needs. Do not take action without being sure that you understand the issues at stake and the wider consequences of your actions. Remember that the very simple rule, nothing about us without us, also applies to intersex people and their allies. Yeah, so basically intersex people exist, and yeah, we're very cool and we're very grateful to our allies, and intersex babies are beautiful and so perfect just the way they are.
Thank you for listening to us.
Yes, and here are our emails. You can always contact us if you have any questions, and also we'll be excited to answer questions in the Zoom session right after this recording session. So yeah, thank you so much everybody for coming, and yeah, we hope you learned something interesting, and yeah, thank you so much. And our website is oieurope.org.